Hello, everybody. Once again, this is the Torg Eternity Delphi Council Debriefings, where the storm has a name. We are your hosts, Lehman, Mark, and Jay. And today we are going to do a few things. We're going to read an email from a fan and answer his question. We are then going to talk about the debilitating mutations that we didn't have time for last episode. And then with the time remaining, if we get there, because we might go down some rabbit holes. If we get there, we'll start on the like the core mechanic of Torg Eternity and disconnection, reality, Everlaw of 1 against the Everlaw of 2, and that fun stuff, both lore-wise and how that fits in the mechanics. So before we get into the debilitating mutations, I'll go ahead and read this email, and please do email us at torgdcd@gmail.com. We love to hear from you, and we will read your email, and we will reply like we're doing with this one. So this one says, "Hi there, very big fan of Torg and love your insights and Q&A. Been playing a sorcerer from Aurorsh and love using the Madness spell. Of late, I have been questioning if I am using the spell correctly. It seems that the spell may cause them to immediately react with a random chaotic attack. But I note the spell duration is 1 round. Is this meant to happen on their attack? The spell isn't clear on this, or if it happens immediately. And if it's immediately, do they act chaotically on their turn, since Madness is still in effect? Thanks in advance for your answer, Angus the Dark Hope." So Angus, thank you very much for the question. And this will lead to rabbit hole number 1. We're like Elmer Fudd hunting some wabbits. So if we look at the spell, Madness, it is a 1 round duration, and it says the cultist thinks of the most horrible, despairing, frightening, and insane thoughts that she can, pushing herself to the verge of insanity before it can take hold of her. She points at her target with a shout and projects these thoughts into the target's head. The target's thoughts become chaotic, causing her to act violently unpredictable ways, or in violently unpredictable ways. So when we get down to the mechanics, on a standard success, the target acts erratically and attacks a randomly determined target. This target can be an ally, enemy, or bystander, and does not have to be adjacent to the target affected by Madness, though she must be able to reach her victim. And then on a good, it can affect all enemies within a small blast area, and on outstanding, all enemies within a medium blast area. So the question basically is this instantaneous? Is this something that happens immediately, or is it something that happens on the target's turn? And then we have the whole issue with the duration being 1 round. So, if we look at the Core Eternity book, and we look specifically at duration, it says how long the spell lasts, starting with the round in which it was invoked. In combat, a duration of 1 minute, 6 rounds, means the spell starts on the current drama card and ends after 5 more rounds have been completely resolved. So, by the way that the rules are written, whatever round you cast it in, that is your 1 round. So it would not last to the subsequent round. From what I see and reading this, and this is not something that I designed, so I'll add that caveat or pass by my eyes with me scrutinizing it. It says basically on a standard success, the target acts erratically and attacks a randomly determined target. It does not say that it's attacking on their turn or anything like that. It says the target can be an ally, enemy, or bystander. So what I would do in this is if the heroes go first, I would have it affect them. If the villains go first and the heroes go, I would have it work immediate, and then by the end of the round, it would stop working. So either way, it's going to work. It's just when is it going to happen? Because if you're using it and you succeed, it should have some effect. But that's on the way that I read it, and other people could have different opinions. Jay, what would you think about this one if this came
Um,
up in your game?
I probably wouldn't allow it to just to give them like a free attack or and move an attack. Um, I would probably mostly follow the rules as written, which is for a round one spell, and this whole like round duration thing is its own issue. But if heroes went first and they cast this on a villain,
Mhm.
and then the villain on the villain's turn, that would take up the villain's action. By rules as written, if you cast it if the villains went first, then technically, basically nothing would happen because by the time you get to round two, it's worn off. But that is not very fulfilling. So I'd probably just treat it as a condition instead
Mhm.
and have it go away after the villain has taken a turn, regardless of what the duration says here. Um, the other reason I wouldn't want to give it a free move and action is there's nothing saying you have to cast this on a villain. Because if you've got your Adinos warrior buddy over 50 meters away fighting against like 10 Gospog, and you cast this on him, he would just get another free attack, which is probably not what it was intended for. The other thing about this spell worth noting is that on higher levels of success, it could affect more people, like a small blast, a medium blast. Personally, I would say it would only affect other people that have the same willpower or less, because otherwise you get into a weird situation of, well, for these people, it wouldn't be a good success. And, so just to make things easier, you would probably want to aim at whoever you think has the highest willpower, and that would affect everyone around them if you got higher levels of success. But that's my opinion anyway.
Okay, let's go over to Mark.
So I'm kind of in the same camp. I think that if you're going to cast the spell, um, and you're successful, you should get a benefit from your effort, your success. And I'd extrapolate it along the lines of the way that vulnerable, very vulnerable, stymied, very stymied works. In that the wording I would use would be on the villain's next action. You get one action. This affects them on one action, because as you said, that it doesn't say on the next attack or immediately or anything like that. It says when the villain attacks. Um, and if the heroes went first, obviously the villains go next, and it happens there, and one round is done because you have a whole card there. But if the villains went first and the heroes went, when we do things like that, the very stymied or the stymied has to affect, you put that condition on the villain, it doesn't just go away until it affects them. And it's like we talk about when we do all out attack, you have to be able to take on the very vulnerable condition in order to be able to invoke that bonus for you, but that sticks around. You have to suffer the consequence of being very vulnerable for the villains. You just can't do it and it goes away unless you got like a flurry card. I mean, that's an edge case. The flurry is a whole different thing. Which, I mean, maybe we bring that up and say, well, what do you do with it if you flurry? The villains don't flurry, but if the villains did flurry, does that guy? Let's say you cast that heroes go first, villains flurry, and you cast madness. Does he attack and then randomly attack and then randomly attack again? I mean, you're still on one card, right?
Yep.
Maybe that's the edge case where it's really, hey, really cool, double bonus. I think you got to get a bonus. I think you got to get a benefit from your action, and it's the next action that the target takes that is affected. Otherwise, as Jay said, it's unfulfilling.
So yes, that are a few ways. Like they said, you could do it as wait to the next round on their action, they get the attack because it is have it similar to a condition, the very vulnerable or vulnerable, etc. The words the two phrases that if I read in this would make it clear is if it says on a standard success, the target immediately acts and attacks randomly, or if it says on a standard success, the target's next action is to attack. Either one of those. So basically, as a game master, you will decide, or your table, you talk with the game master if you're the caster of this spell, talk and determine which one it is, and then either way stick with it, whether you're going to give it a little bonus one way or another way with like the flurry type thing. Hey, the villains are flurrying, but if I cast, heroes go first, villains flurry, then I can cast this, and since it lasts a round, there's a little bonus. Or hey, even if they have already gone, I cast it and they immediately attack. Either way, I think are possibilities that you can use. They both have their benefits, and both of those would actually allow it, instead of saying it ends at the end of the round, and if you go last, then it basically didn't do anything. So
just be consistent when the enemies
Yes,
cast
yes.
it on the
Be
Storm Knights
consistent.
too.
Yep.
However you adjudicate it, that's the way it works, and be consistent.
And it is fine also if you adjudicate it one way and determine that that is not the way, let everybody know, switch it over,
Right.
and then stay with that. Switching things is fine, just don't do it every other way because willy-nilly this is what I decided at this moment.
Yeah.
So, okay, so thank you very much.
Yay, emails.
Angus, the Dark Hope, thank you for your email, and for everybody else, please go ahead and write us, and we will read this. So let's go ahead and move into the debilitating mutations. So check out the previous episode for all of the good things that you get from the abomination perks.
Here comes all the crap.
Here's all the bad stuff that can happen. So, and we discussed the mechanics on how the debilitating mutations occurred, and where the little contention that happened when the preview came out, and it was a little bit different. Tharkold was one of the later books, and when you have great heroic genres like Nile Empire and the Savage Pulp of Living Land coming out, and Isle, where you can be forces of light, the cyber papacy of being in the resistance, and then you come to Tharkold and you get all these bad things happening. It kind of can put a shock into your system. So that's why there was some. But look at the previous episode. We won't get into that. We'll just talk about this. So basically, you roll a d20, you look at the chart, you see what you landed on, and each one, I believe, is a range of 2. So basically, there's 10 things that can happen. So we'll start off with the first one, Twitchy. Basically, you receive a -2 to all lockpicking, spellcasting, or tests of manual dexterity. So, Jay, what are your thoughts on Twitchy?
First, do we know if Jam has also made a larger debilitating mutations chart, or was that just for the regular ones?
I think JM did. I think it was this one that he did because his players really liked these type of. They really got into it.
Want to see that someday. So this one is actually, if your character is not a lockpicker or spellcaster, not that bad. It depends on the GM's definition of manual dexterity. So it is a little vague. Like, does melee combat count?
Right, or shooting, hand-eye.
I think if it's so it's kind of vague. I think if spellcasting is affected, it would probably affect shooting, unless your gun was
other tests of manual dexterity.
Yeah, unless your gun was in your cyber arm or something like that. I don't know if I would have it apply to unarmed or melee combat, though. That's different, but that's one to check with your GM, because this could either be a barely affects you or completely breaks your character.
Yes.
Which is, I think, what one of the issues came up is some of these debilitating mutations just completely wreck one very specific kind of character. So if you just happen to roll that D20 and that's what you got, you were like, well, that's that.
I'm not a
I don't know
Tharkold
if that-
spellcaster anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that wrecked is
I mean,
minus,
if you have
minus
a
two is not wrecked. Minus two is just
minus two for
stagnant.
what you're supposed to be the best at, it's rough. But that's why they change it. So you roll the 2d20, choose which one, so you have a bit more choice.
And then
But
you
yeah,
can choose the final form.
Exactly.
Right. So, Mark, your thoughts on the...
I'm a minus two doesn't tear me up, even if it's in my wheelhouse of what if I'm a dwarf. Well, dwarf's not going to have this. If I'm a basher, we could. Yeah, I guess. If I'm a basher that's swinging an impact hammer, and the whole thing about what I do is based on dexterity, and let's be honest, there's a lot of stuff in Torg Eternity that I don't care what kind of character you are, it's based on dexterity. It's a lot of that stuff. Minus two on your dex. If you decide that, or if you decide to adjudicate manual dexterity as I'm testing dexterity, that's a lot of stuff.
That'd be a lot, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't see a minus two as debilitating to the character as you do, Jay. So if I'm building that basher, I've got a 12 strength and I've put 3 adds in my melee combat. I'm starting out of the chute at 15, and if I'm going up against mooks, chances are good I need an 8 or a 10. Okay, so I'm already in good success range out of the gate just with my base skill, and I'm taking a minus 2. And I'm rolling a die. I could roll poorly, hit like maybe a 5 or a 6, and still hit them with a standard success. And if I've built that character like that, I'm hitting with 16 or 17 points of damage. I'm still wiping them out.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to the dramatic scene and we're fighting the King Daddy-O evil, and I need to get those extra 2 points, because if I don't get that second BD on my damage, we're not doing a wound, and he doesn't take shock because he's relentless. Now it's really important. But I mean, this is a debilitating mutation, right? It's not supposed to be, I get all of the candy over here and I don't ever have to have a stomach ache.
So, game masters, please determine what manual dexterity is. Be clear with your players. Because some players would be happy and accept it, and other ones would just be like,
You're not wrong.
I guess Joe Jr. is coming along, and hopefully I don't roll a 1 and a 2 again.
Well, but that's the thing I like about on the sidebar on page 24 about the debilitating mutation, and the way you select what you want it to settle on. Right, and then you randomize it, and if you luck into, I rolled what I chose, okay, it stabilizes, you're done. But if it hits that twitchy,
it's only for one game, maybe
not even, it's one session or one act. I think.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
So I mean, how long does that last? And game masters, if you want to say this is a scene, that might be a little pain in the ass though, to roll every single scene until it settles in. But if that's the game you want to run, knock yourself out.
Yep. So let's move on. Light sensitivity. Mutant is sensitive to daylight, suffers a -2 penalty to all sight-related tests while in full daylight. So very a little clearer, basically. Is it daylight or not? Are you in the shade? Are you inside? Again, while you have this could really mess up all your rolls if you're in the day, but if you're at night, not so
or
much.
Or a Rorsch.
Or, in a Rorsch, you know that it's going to be night when the bad stuff starts happening. So, Mark, any comments or thoughts?
I mean, this I like this one. I might take this one. This might be the one I pick because, like you said, going to a Rorsch, this ain't gonna come up. Here's the question on this one. If you cast a daylight spell or something that produces light that's equivalent to daylight, does that trigger this?
I'm not sure if anything's actually considered full daylight besides daylight, or I know maybe the alchemy potion, liquid sunlight,
I
but
think that I don't know.
light
But
spells and
that's
that I would say no, because it's not light coming all
if
over.
it would damage a vampire or other light sensitive creature, I would say it would trigger this.
Jay, your thoughts?
This one, my initial thought is that this is for stuff like find evidence analysis, like visual related. Are you guys taking sight related tests as like anything in the daylight, or just like that kind of awareness sort of thing? Because that's what I was thinking originally, but how are you guys
another one,
this?
Game Masters.
Yeah.
Determine and let talk with your players
Let's
over it.
see.
Yeah, it says all sight related. So yeah, it's basically manual dexterity. How do you take sight related tests? Do you take that's shooting somebody down there? Maybe not close, but maybe medium and far range. That's
Like
sight
it's
related.
I guess the equivalent of orcs and goblins in D&D, right? Like
Dodge. I got to see it coming. Is dodge a sight related test?
So
is hacking a computer a sight related test?
Yeah.
So no, this would again, I would say the same thing as we said on Twitchy. Game masters talk with your players and determine what you think all site related tests would involve. Would it just be like find evidence analysis, or would you consider it other things? Like, I would definitely wouldn't do it scholar or science or anything like that, but other things perhaps. So.
See, you almost have to take this on a case by case, because you said scholar, but what if it's like I'm trying to decipher runes on the wall?
Right, the sun's in my eyes.
I can't see it very clearly because I've got sight problems. So I mean, adjudicate that on a case by case.
Okay, barbed flesh. Quick movements are very uncomfortable, cause minor bleeding and discomfort each time the mutant uses a run action. She suffers 1 point of shock. And again, to clarify, in any books that you see rush is run. They're the same thing. It's just once it was determined, hey, flying at a run sounds funny, and that's when they did it. But not all the authors use the same terms. So run or rush are the same. You suffer 1 point of shock. So we'll go back to Jay. What are your thoughts on this?
I think this one's a good one to make sure you describe it happening whenever the mutant is running. The thing is, this is technically, I guess, shock damage. So I imagine you could kind of get around it with a VAV suppressor, but that's kind of really going out of your way to get around it. So I don't know if that's even really worth it. Yeah, this one is not the worst you could get, because you don't really find yourself running all that often. Even if you do, it's only for a few rounds. So I think this one is not too bad to get. I probably, if I was writing this, I would have probably made it 2 shock and be a lot rougher. But yeah, not bad. And there's ways to mollify it, and you can even just take a recovery action too after running if it's really an issue.
Mm-hmm. Mark.
I don't remember what it is, but I think there's something other than a VAV suppressor that you can use to mitigate there may be multiple ways to mitigate that point of shock. And I would almost like to see something in the debilitating mutations that states that if you don't, it's like when you build a shock monkey and you have to take shock to activate things. If you don't take the shock, you can't activate the thing. You have to take the shock. You can't, like this, especially I think there's some things in Tharkold that are like, if you don't suffer the shock, you can't get the benefit of whatever it is that you did. And there are a number of things in Pan Pacifica where you take shock in like the paths to do stuff. And I think that it would be, the barbed flesh. You got to take a point if you figure out how to mitigate that, then what is the point of taking, okay, I've gamed this system. I can get this. Again, I'm back to the candy, no stomach ache.
Yep. I think this thematically would work well with the metal infused skin, where
Yep.
everything is kind of in your flesh, and it hurts when it helps in some ways and it hurts in other ways. But yes, I think about mitigation, game masters. Is that something that you consider a big cheese fest or not? Um, if you do think so, and you are at the decision of, hey, I don't want the suppressor to get rid of this shock because then it's not a debilitating mutation, it's a freebie. Talk to make sure that the player knows it before they determine that that's the one that they're going to settle on. So then we have Hunchback. Character suffers an additional -2 penalty when running. So rushing also.
Right.
Mark.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's like the other -2 penalties. This is just a different reason. This one's probably and I haven't read these before, so I haven't ever played an Abomination or Debilitating Mutations. So I purposely didn't. So I was like, well, let's see what these are. This one's so far.
Sometimes
this one
game masters have to make instant decisions in rulings.
Yes, they do. I mean, this would be not a bad one because if I don't run, I don't have a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
When -2 went additional, so I'm -4 when running. So if I don't ever run, but how often does that happen?
Every chase that you like putting in every adventure.
Yeah, Darby would not like this. This would not be good for Darby.
Jay.
So that oversized arm mutant in my game currently I mentioned before has this, and he has subsequently needed to run almost every single encounter.
There you go. There's your answer.
That's why he's not been able to climb up cliffs. He's been falling off things constantly. It's that double dip of the going from -2 to -4 is actually pretty serious, but it makes for a lot of hilarious situations.
Yeah, I can see where this one can bring in a lot of story potential. So disfigured leg. A character suffers a -2 penalty to movement speed and a -1 penalty to dodge and maneuver.
Oh.
So, Mark, your instant reaction.
I'm not taking this one. This is bad. Okay, now I'm with Jay on this one. This one's bad. So -2 movement penalty to movement speed. So I'm 2 meters of movement down. Essentially, my 10 dex is an 8 dex now, which may or may. I mean, this is I play this most of the time as a theater of the mind game. So not as that particular aspect, not as big a deal. Unless you say they're at 40 meters, you can only move 27 now, or 40 or 38 or whatever, and you can't get there. So okay, now my meter guy can't go and whack him. But -1 penalty on dodge and maneuver, especially if I made maneuver one of the interaction attacks I'm good at, I don't like this at all.
Jay.
Yeah, this one's rough. Though, point of clarification, I guess, when something says a -1 penalty to dodge maneuver, when it's a penalty, I believe that just applies to tests, right? Would this affect your defense?
I would say it wouldn't, because the active defense is just generating a bonus number at a base of +1.
Now, if it did, that would have been brutal.
I read it as you're dodging your maneuver or down 1. I didn't read it as a penalty to it.
If it's not common, or how to say, the author guidelines state that we're not really supposed to use the dodge maneuvers and interaction attacks as skill tests for other things. But plenty of people and official authors have done a dodge test or a maneuver test to get past something. So it would apply in those cases when you're doing active skill test. But yeah, the -2 penalty movement speed, even your base movement is down 2. Then when you try to run, it's even
Yeah, it's
way
like
more
6.
than the -2 that the Hunchback gives. So yeah, I think this was on one of the high, out of what we've read so far. This is on one of the more penalizing, the more
Yeah.
debilitating of the mutations. Weak fortitude. The armor, if armor normally causes fatigue, it causes an additional +1 shock. So Jay,
This is as written is kind of like a gimme if your mutation is the metal infused skin or the what's it called again? The spines. Yeah. Because then
mm-hmm.
you're not wearing any armor that causes fatigue, so you're fine. And the thing is, the odds are like most characters probably aren't wearing armor that causes fatigue. A lot of people really try to avoid that, so this is a pretty weak one. I could see a lot of people just aiming for it, like that to be their preferred one, especially if they're like a sorcerer or something who's never going to wear fatiguing armor in the first place. Whether you as a GM would allow that to work with the metal infused skin and those, and I would kind of be leaning to make this give them fatigue 1,
Mm-hmm.
or at least if a fatigue result comes up, you take 1 shock, maybe not the full 2, something like that. But yeah, I would, otherwise it's kind of too much of a gimme.
Mark.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. If you took the metal infused skin or the as if you have armor but you're not, this becomes okay. I take 1 point of shock for fatigue because of the way that the metal infused into my skin, it's fatiguing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not every mutation is the same. Not every mutant who gets metal infused skin infused it the same way, right? Or did use the same metal or whatever. So that I'm not letting this just, I took it and this is an armor and so I don't get fatigues. Ha ha, I gamed the system. No, you didn't.
And I would do fatigue, no matter what, is going to be 2 points just showing up, because even people who don't wear it. But I would add that additional shock to the one. So just to clarify that, so that we don't get an email next week saying, "Hey, I thought fatigue was automatically 2 points.
Oh,
How does
yeah,
that
yeah.
work again?"
Yes.
So
yeah, what?
just wanting to clarify that we're talking
Yes.
about that additional. Like, yes, it does count as armor that fatigues. So therefore, you get 3 total points, 2 from the normal fatigue that comes out, 1 for this. So yeah, let's move on. Soars. Soars mean survival tests and strength or medicine tests to allow the character to naturally heal suffer a -2 penalty. So, Jay, what are your thoughts on this one?
I can count the number of characters that have had to make natural healing tests on my one hand in my campaign. So yeah, this one's pretty another safe one. That's probably what you want to aim for. I would probably balance this more by making that really play into your outsider
Mm-hmm.
and be part of the physical description and have NPCs react to it more. But yeah, otherwise, as long as you don't mind looking like Pizza the Hut, it's probably fine.
Mark.
I'm with Jay on the game balance. This is, unless you're in the living land where you can make a natural healing test at the end of every scene. If I remember that correctly, because my
I
memory's been
believe
faulty.
something like the law of life.
Yeah,
We
I
just
think it's the
talked
law
about
of
it a
life.
couple weeks
We
ago.
just talked about
Yeah,
it.
we did. Yeah, you would think that I would remember things
and it's
like that.
or no,
Yeah.
it's defeat. Never
So,
mind.
but you know, that's going to come up in the living lands, but everywhere else, not so much. I might broaden this, like Jay said, to pull the outsider kind of thing in there, and go so far as you've got open sores that make healing you a -2, and not just natural, just healing you is a because okay, I've got these open sores going on, and then I'm in a combat where the swords slash me and the claws rake across my chest. And now, what's an open sore that I can't fix, and what's the healing? Where's the wound that I need to tend to as first aid or whatever? -2 on healing generally, just because it's harder. That seems to be the spirit of what this was.
Yeah. Looking at the comma placement, I would say that it's all survival tests. So the survival test, comma, and strength or medicine to allow the character to naturally heal without extra commas. So my reading of it would be any survival test. If you're trying to survive, those open sores are gonna hamper you. The strength and medicine to allow to naturally heal, I would probably do the same as Mark and add first aid to that, because first aid is actually the healing and medicine is the helping not have penalties. So I would probably either add first aid or swap out medicine with first aid for that. And like Jay, I could probably count the number of naturally heals that happen on maybe my elbow.
And it throws in there extreme susceptible to extreme temperatures, and it glosses right over it. There's no mechanic that's attached to that. But
I think that's the survival.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if you're going to throw it in, if you're going to say that, if you're going to say extreme temperatures, then there's got to be, to me, there needs to be something attached to that. If it's part of survival, then just save your word count, pull that out, just say survival tests.
Okay, let's move on to cybernetic sympathy. Mutations work similarly to occult tech. The character counts as a cyborg for the cyber psychosis cosm card, and may use any mutation ability. And any use of mutation abilities are contradictory in realities of lower than Tech 24. So, Jay, your thoughts on cybernetic sympathy?
So last week I mentioned that one of my players built like a dynasty of metal infused skin mutant characters, and they all had cybernetic sympathy. So they really went for a more like, it wasn't like a fleshy body with metal, like they were completely like Borged up looking. So the nice thing about this is if you already have occult tech anyway, the cyber psychosis card is going to nail you. But that whole thing about mutation abilities now being contradictory in lower than Tech 24 areas is pretty significant, because mutations are normally not a star perk. So now you do have to worry if you do have wings, they could cause you to disconnect in core Earth or basically anywhere that's not Pan-Pacifica, Tharkold, or Cyber Papacy. So you do have to be a bit more careful. But in my experience, at least my players are very cavalier about possible disconnection, which we might get into later tonight. But so it's fine. And basically, it just kind of makes you look cool. So that this one's not so bad.
Mark.
Yeah, I mean, I embrace the 4-case contradiction on almost every character I ever build anyway. And a starred perk is not that big a deal. And this is really only a starred perk in 3 of the 8 cosms, right? So, okay. And how often does cyber psychosis? See, I like how classic Torg used to use the whole dehumanizing thing with all of that and building it on. But anyway, the cyber psychosis is not nearly as impactful as it used to be.
And this one's a specific card, not one of like the, what is it, 2 or 3 varieties in each of the Tharkold and
here's what you do. For each character who's got cybernetics, put another one of those bad boys in the deck, right? Make it a little more common.
Ooh.
Yes,
I like the way you think.
This one I see
about pulling cards out, not talking about putting more in.
I'm like, ooh. I like the flavor of this one a lot. Like you were talking about, Jay, adding either more cyber psychosis cards or counting any of those similar cards that affect, because some of them only affect some affect both occult tech and cyberware, and I want to say one of them only affects one or the other.
Right.
And I'm not going to say it now because I can't remember, and as soon as I say it, it will be wrong. But I would maybe have any of those cards
Out of
affected.
Tharkold or out of Cyber Papacy?
I want to. I'm not sure. I really.
Oh, you know what? I don't have the expanded.
Don't worry.
I'm
So-
gonna put that back because I've only got the 10. I don't have the 20.
But there is one of those Cosm cards that only affects one, and the other ones affect both occult tech and cyberware. And I would just have this thing affect everything. And then with the contradictory, then it's like a piece of tech. You know, whether it's a Pan Pacifica pistol or a Cyber Papal sword or whatever, you are able. It's kind of turns you comparable to that. So yeah,
You can talk in a robot voice.
So we'll go to Brittle Bones. The character is pretty simple, straightforward. Character takes a -1 penalty to toughness. So, Mark, -1
not
toughness.
Do not want. I mean, -1 toughness. If you're going to play a character who's designed to not be in combat, or you're going to build him or her to soak well, doesn't matter. But if you're going to build a slugger who suddenly has brittle bones, and that 1 point of tough, just Wednesday night, at one point that somebody, he enhanced this and he's like, I only got you 1 point. I was like, that was the 1 point I needed. Thank you very much. 1 point matters.
Jay.
Yeah, I mean, even I've seen a lot of people make min-maxed characters for non-combat characters with a strength of 5 and maybe no armor. And with the concept being, well, I'm not a combat character. But often combat has a way of finding you anyways. So this could be really bad. But that said, like, it's obviously not going to be one anyone's going to want to settle on. But it might pop up in your face a few times before you get the one that you do. I don't foresee anyone really settling on this because I think a -1 toughness is just like too much of a penalty, even if it's not your focus.
It makes the squishy even more squishy.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be easier to take damage.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that one's a pretty rough one, but I think it would be a good one to pop up on before it settles, like Jay was talking about. Strong Odor is the last one, which is you suffer a -2 penalty to beast riding, persuasion, and stealth tests. So Jay, what are your thoughts on Strong Odor?
So I'm assuming then that the penalties will stack. Right. So along with Outsider, that's a -6 to persuasion. So this person's not talking to people.
This is your face.
Unless you're keeping them in a hazmat suit, or something. This is the kind of thing where, mechanically speaking, for just like a combat character who doesn't really want to be doing any of this other stuff, I could see them not really caring too much, which does mean, I think, to an extent, that GM would want to reinforce that the rest of the party doesn't enjoy this. And
they're always there, and everybody else is here.
Exactly. And a -2 to stealth can be rough because occasionally you do need to make stealth tests, and if you're not a super stealther, a -2 can really mess you up. And all it takes is one person to screw up that stealth test, and then things get out of control. So but I can also picture people wanting to play a big stinky mutant. So I could see people stopping on this, but I wouldn't. Like I would probably want to stay away from this one.
Mark, your thoughts?
So the danger this one has is the same danger that the game system or the game concept has that you might run into, and that's you've got this metallic wings coming out the back of this guy rolling through the cyber papacy. How do you adjudicate this place that doesn't look at him and immediately blow his face off because he's a demon? Right? You start, we've got this massive code, we put him in the van, he never comes out, whatever. Well, this says causing others discomfort to immediately notice her presence.
Mhm.
I mean, so okay, we're not sneaking anywhere with this day today. I mean, what is that? Holy cow, dude, bathe. So you might want to adjudicate if the mission that you're going on is going to be something where stealth is a thing, that -2 stealth penalty hits it, but you might want to also kind of throw something in there like, all right, so you have to be careful not to exert yourself because that's what triggers everybody notices your odor, and so I will, I'm going to be the sole arbiter of when you've exerted yourself. And if you have exerted yourself, you can go shower and knock the funk off and get back to 0 until you exert yourself again. And after X number of hours, it just comes back naturally. So every 4 hours you got to be in the shower or something. I don't know, come up with something to adjudicate that. Otherwise, you've got Skippy the Adinos running around and everybody goes, why is there a lizard in the middle of the Times Square? Well, I mean, it's because it's living land now, but there's a lot of them. But you know what I mean? It's why do we have this obvious sore thumb sticking out in the middle of this group that wouldn't be able to hide, but we've got to hide, and so we're hand waving that so we can play the game.
I'll just add that the -6 when you add all the bonuses together to persuasion, that's really gonna hurt your requisitions. You might as well just. And the -2 penalty to stealth, and we do this sometimes in organized play, I would have that affect whoever rolled for a group if you have extra effort or combined effort, an additional penalty for that gets stacked on. So you figure out how many people are in the group that the one character is trying to lead, and you at the end of that you add an additional -2 penalty. So
thank you, Pigpen.
So then it's not a way to get around that by having somebody else roll. It's like, oh man, I have to get you through this stealth check. I can't stand it. So yeah, those are the debilitating mutations. They're just an interesting and I think fun way to work with the mutations. And again, you roll, you pick what you want it to settle on. You roll randomly until you get that last one. And some of these you can have fun with a session, or if you roll the same one before it settles a couple of times. Oh, those sores came back. I thought I got rid of them. You can bring it into the narrative. So those are everything and anything and everything with the abomination category. So we were going to do disconnection, but I don't think we have 10 minutes. We're not going to do
10 minutes, huh?
disconnection.
Do you want to just talk about contradictions?
So let's.
Or no?
Well, I would prefer not to, because then again, like this one, I had to reference the other one, and I don't want to have it where we're only doing half of a subject. So. Any thoughts on anything else that we talked about? The duration type thing, or
actually
abomination?
Continuing on with abominations.
Sure.
As I mentioned, there's been a number of abominations in my game, and one thing that my players have done is actually they've chosen kind of combinations of mutations and debilitating mutations, and you could get like a whole family that has those, or community, even though it's very chaotic. And my one player chose for his mutant that she was suffering from a very specific type of radiation, Cherenkov radiation, which is visible to humans as like a blue glow.
Mm-hmm.
So basically use that to inform how the mutant looked like. So her body was made of jagged metal with hooks and barbs coming out of it. She had metal wings, which were not the occultic wings, they're just mutated. And anytime she used her powers, like actually would fly or whatever, she would glow with like a blue light, which made her flying around the middle of the cyber papacy quite interesting. But then I basically borrowed that from his idea in the Muty Town adventure. So I think giving like an entire community of mutants in the Blasted Land similar types of debilitating or regular mutations can help make them seem kind of like a community and be less work for the GM, because you don't want to have to come up with all the mutations for like a ton of people. But if everyone's got like tentacle arms or something that's not even in the list, then that can kind of unify it a bit more and make it seem like a good set piece.
Yeah, like a setting. This mutation is common in this region.
In this area of the Blasted Lands.
We all drank the same water out of the same nuclear fallout cooling pool.
Like maybe there's a chunk of the Maelstrom Bridge stuck in the middle of the lake or something, and everyone's getting the same vibes off of it.
Sure.
And then, that could also be one of those expand that debilitating mutation charts. Like Jay said, his players really liked having that randomness and wanted more, so he basically doubled it so that every side of the D20 gave you something different.
Also, as a GM, don't be afraid. You can always roll on the debilitating or even choose mutations for abominations, like the standard abomination bear or the wolves, the standard threats abominations. You can give them additional abilities from the abomination category.
When while we were talking about it, we were doing it line item by line item, right? We never talked about, we glossed over, but it's quite conceivable that you have 2, 3, or more of these debilitating mutations, and now they're stacking up with one another. And I'm like, I wonder, can you stack these together? Like if I hit the same one twice, because I've got three things that I got to roll on this chart, and I've picked 3 things that it's gonna settle into, but I got to roll 3 times because I have 3 mutations. So I have 3 debilitating mutations, right? So what happens if I hit the same one twice? Do they stack?
It's every other mutation gives you
but my point is, if you're rolling multiple times, and you hit the toughness thing, do you now have -2 toughness?
You roll again.
Jay's looking up the roll.
Does it say that?
Yeah, it says
okay.
If the result is that I just lost my spot. If the die rolls result in debilitating mutations the character already possesses, roll both dice again. Because remember, you're not just rolling a die, you roll 2 dice, and then you choose which of those 2. So you have a lot more control over it.
Okay. Again, I haven't run that, so.
But I would also say, hey, Game Masters, if you're fine with a -2 toughness,
stack it up.
Go with
debilitating.
Go with what makes your game better for you and your group. So I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. And since we didn't get to the ending part of what we were going to do, now you as listeners do know what our next episode will be about. So we will talk about the standard test, how the dice mechanic works for that. And because we need to set that up as a base to then explain contradictions, disconnection checks, when they occur, surges, which trigger a contradiction check, the difference between checks and tests, and get into the nitty gritty so that you understand kind of how the lore works and what different effects or not effects occur when those happen. So thank you very much for listening to this episode. Please write us at torgdcd@gmail.com, and we will read those and answer any questions you have, or just read them if you just want to say something. Other than that, don't have anything else. So until next time, we hope you have fun in your own Cosmverse. Bye.